Sabrie Alexander was a 27-year-old woman who struggled with a multitude of physical and mental conditions. Her challenges included an aggressive seizure disorder and severe depression. Sabrie was also bipolar. In April of 2014, Sabrie was sentenced to serve 2 to 20 years at Huron Valley's Women's Correctional Facility. Her lawyer and family begged the court to place Sabrie in a facility that could help manage her mental conditions. Their motions were denied. 7 months later, Sabrie Alexander died alone in an isolation cell. For 2 days, her screams of terror went ignored by prison officials assigned to supervise her. Sabrie's young son is left without a mother. We are left with a prison system that does not protect its most vulnerable inmates, many of whom are destined to suffer and die as Sabrie did. This is the story of the tragic death of Sabrie Alexander, but in many ways, it's also the story of thousands of other American men and women who are broken each day by the cruel and unusual punishment of solitary confinement.
There are a huge number of people with very serious mental illness in solitary confinement in the United States prisons. I'm embarrassed that this is going on in my country. At every level of care, these people have been neglected and treated badly.
Solitary confinement is when a prisoner is alone in his or her cell for nearly all the day, every day.
It's a complete traumatizing and shocking experience. They put handcuffs on you that's attached to a dog leash. So from the very minute you're made to feel like an animal, it's chaos. It can be as little as 60 days, and it can be as long as life. And oftentimes that is the case. There's many men and women who have died in solitary confinement.
She wanted to own her own auto repair shop, but because of her persistent seizures, a medical condition that she struggled with for years, that was not an option according to her medical advisors. People with seizures shouldn't work around certain equipment or tools. So, and she was very focused on, she had that tunnel vision, this is the only thing I want to do. And I think it really affected her and contributed to her depression because she couldn't live out her passion.
People with serious mental illness are still put in solitary confinement. There's a few different reasons. One is there's been this trend recently to change the sign on the door. And instead it used to say administrative segregation, and now it says acute mental illness housing. And say, okay, now they're not in solitary confinement anymore.
It was 12:30 a.m. on November 17th. I was awakened by a phone call from the institution telling me they hate to make calls like this, and I just lost it at that point. I said, don't tell me something happened to her, and that's when they told me that she was deceased.
In her case, we have someone whose sentence was intended to be no more than 2 years in duration. She essentially served a life sentence because she died halfway through the period of incarceration.
When people break rules, they're put in solitary confinement. The more people are identified as rule breakers, the more their complaints about physical medicine and mental health problems are just ignored.
Huron Valley is a pretty big prison that houses only women. They're isolated, and the result of them being isolated is A, that they are often in distress, and B, they are removed from the ability to receive help.
I remember one conversation that I had with her, and she told me, she said, "Mom, why does life have to be so difficult for me?" And I couldn't answer. And I told her, now, she'll have to get the answer from God, won't she?
Those people are in there all alone with no one to advocate for them, to understand them, or to help them. And to me, that was very horrific to see that and to know that.
Behind steel doors and bulletproof glass, this is where you'll find Michigan's leftovers. When most of the state's psychiatric hospitals began to close, this became their last best hope. This is where they've been piling up.
The state and the federal government have pretty much walked away, in my opinion. Jails have become the dumping ground.
About the early 1980s, Michigan, under Governor Engler, closed virtually all of the mental health facilities. So the prisons were faced with a difficult situation of dealing with a lot of mentally ill prisoners, and they're not set up for that.
The rules that are constructed weren't designed to treat people with mental illness. And so if you're suffering from schizophrenia and you begin to beat on your door, you're going to be written up with another misconduct, which adds more time to your time in solitary confinement.
It's a broken system. If we repaired that, there would be almost no use for solitary at all.
The Eighth Amendment forbids prison systems to inflict cruel and unusual punishment. And what the courts have held is that where conditions of confinement predictably cause medical or mental health distress, then that's illegal under the Eighth Amendment.
Frankly, it's something that every single prisoner, in my mind, should be walking out with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. What they see and experience inside prison creates trauma for them that they have to relive for the rest of their lives.
By most standards, solitary confinement is inhumane, it's immoral, and for that reason alone, it is an imperative that it be eliminated.
The mental health services are grossly inadequate in solitary confinement, and therefore the mental illness gets worse, and this is a problem around the country.
Solitary confinement is an escalating response to problems that need to be solved other ways. And it's an escalating response that is dangerous for prisoners. It's dangerous for them, it's dangerous for the public when they get out and have been in solitary confinement for long periods of time and have lost the ability to cope. And it is not a good way to run a correctional facility.
We cannot allow people who are mentally ill, mentally or physically disabled, and the most vulnerable to continue to suffer